or an alternate way of doing.
Yes, truth. So let me go ahead and get this going now. All right, good evening, guys. This is Ken and Brad. This is the Innovations working room for July 26, 2024. Just as sort of a restatement of our week-long project, since I rehearsed this before we started recording. About a week ago, Brad asked me what I do. I explained that I am a teacher and coach for professional traders who work for institutions, but also for themselves. And my business partner, rest in peace, was a world-class psychologist who used to help folks discover their true nature, work with stress management, did some hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming. I handled just the technical elements of trading and performance mastery, like how to do the nuts and bolts like a athletic coach. He passed away about 18 months ago. They didn't have a good continuity program in the business, and after about a year of trying to hold the pieces and parts together, there was just there was just a hole in the center of the organization for psychology. They had some coaches that they had used to contract with, but there was no one clear driving force with a particular perspective on psychology that could sort of pull everything together under the continuity of that brand. And what he did was not what I do. And so I didn't feel authentic or competent in trying to represent his style of psychology. And so I just kind of opted out of that. Most of the people that were there in that organization who were there primarily for psychology have sort of moved on to other endeavors or other service providers. The folks who are primarily traders have a good number of them have migrated to me, and I felt like it was necessary for me to add some psychology to the mix that would round out what we do, which is really a three-headed monster of trading performance, which is systems, self, and markets. And so market analysis in a broad sense is what I do as like a strategic analyst. I have some frameworks that we use to characterize the conditions of markets in order to look for certain kinds of opportunities. So broad market classification. And then within that, there are certain areas of market conditions that I tend to specialize in. And so I develop systems that are designed to trade specifically in those particular areas. So I'm not trying to trade everything all the time. I have very specific kinds of targets under certain conditions that are optimized for our systems. And then I teach some performance psychology on how to operate that system for that niche. But some of the broader areas of psychology are still open. So I've been moving out in that direction in the past year by getting certifications in ICF coaching in a particular brand called whole person coaching, which takes the whole wheel of life and seeks to integrate multiple intelligences and different perspectives and get aligned with your bad self and all that, which was useful and interesting and for me as a whole person. Some of that is helpful for trading, but not a lot of it, because there's probably a psychological profile of people that self-select to be full-time traders in our way, and those kinds of guys tend to be effective at compartmentalizing professional performance and adopting a persona for the duration of the trading, and then depart that workshop and then go out to the rest of their lives, wherever it may be. And the ability to compartmentalize like that is one of the edges that high frequency traders and professional traders have that maybe other common folks don't have, which gives them a persistent edge in the market because they have the ability to manage psychology during those periods of performance. There are consequences to that because sometimes guys use techniques for self-control that maybe are not as healthy as they could be. They may have just evolved as a coping mechanism for their experience in life, and there may be a cost associated with that they have to pay in other ways, but they're typically successful at keeping that out of their trading. Some cases, yes, some cases, no. I've also, so I did the ICF training. I do some systems thinking work. I have done some coaching with protreptic coaching, and I am being coached by a Lakota Sioux medicine man, and I'm learning that the indigenous ways of knowing really resonate with me when it comes to understanding self and mission and all that. Protreptic coaching, just for the record, is a particular style of coaching that grew up in the academy under Aristotle back in Athens, 2,500 years ago. And it was a style of coaching that was developed for the philosopher kings of Athens. Now, those guys were supremely powerful, and there was nobody that they could rely on for advice or counsel, because everybody that would talk to them was either intimidated by the fact they were talking to the king, or they were trying to curry favor and were being yes men. And so the philosopher kings had this problem about being able to get good advice or trust the advice that they got. And so Aristotle and Plato put their mind to it and developed what was called the protreptic coaching, which is a particular form of illuminating the challenging issues that an executive decides to bring into the public space and place on the table for discussion. And the social contract between that person being coached and the coach is that the coach is not going to offer advice or recommendations or judgment, but is merely there to be an accountability partner, an illuminator, a person who is going to ask almost spontaneous questions that go deep from a surprising angle, multiple perspectives, with the idea being that by asking a surprising question and sort of requiring the coachee to go deep right away and just start responding in a dialogue without having a chance to develop some kind of sophisticated, nuanced, self-deluding answer, but sort of get right to the heart of the matter and then see what comes out and put that on the table. And then there's an iterative dialogue between the coach and the coachee that explores those things wherever it seems interesting, with the central agreement being that the person being coached gets to decide what it is that we're going to talk about, and when is it off limits, and when is enough, and deciding what to reveal. There's no effort to try to explore deep into past lives or childhood trauma. It really is simply to have a public discussion in an open space with accountability and enlightenment about the topic that's on the table, and to sort of dehumanize it or desensitize it from the person, and really just explore the concepts as they start unfolding. So if I wanted to talk about honesty, then the protreptic coach might say, and what are the associated feelings that you've seen people have with honesty, and like one or two or three, and tell me about this, and then tell me about that. What does this mean in the world? And pretty soon you start getting engaging conversations around these concepts. And we trust the executive, or we trust the coachee, to reflect upon the things that came out almost spontaneously. The idea is that you get a closer connection to your true self or your deeper self in that kind of spontaneous conversation, and that you're doing that in a trusted space with your protreptic coach, who is creating that safe space for you in order to explore these concepts in a protected way. Protreptic coaching is connected to true storytelling, the process and method, in a sense that true storytelling is taught by David Boji and the True Storytelling Institute, who partnered with a protreptic coach from Denmark in the development of the true storytelling technique. The idea behind true storytelling is that if we can create a safe space and then commit to telling the truth, and then the other people in that circle committing to non-judgment, non-hurriedness, no advice, no criticisms, no recommendations, but simply to be there to sort of witness the birth of a new story told in just that way and from the depths of your truth. And we're trying to suspend our judgment and just listen deeply in a true listening way in order to experience what it's like to sit in the truth and to have that person telling the story let the story unfold in its way, almost without your intention, but it kind of story emerges. And the people in that room add some novelty and other perspectives that cause the story to kind of morph every time you do this. In that tradition, the principles are we begin with safety so that we can learn to trust with those that are in that circle. And then from the learning to trust, we can begin to invest in truth telling up to a certain level of comfort and whatever, we feel we can reveal. And in that sense, there's sort of a protreptic style to that, in that the person decides or the story decides what's going to come out. And then we look at it on the table and we don't judge them. We just let the story sit and grow and become part of the universe. And it's sort of a gift to the universe, and we let that story as a listener resonate. And when we close that circle, there's time later outside that for processing and thinking and advising and working together and restorying and some of that. But in the creative moment of true storytelling, it's really just to get the stories that are inside out. Well, I say all that just to say that in terms of the psychology that I offer to my clients, I work both on the holistic person and the conscious storytelling level, but also with the principles of protreptic and true storytelling, where the concepts are already formed and conscious, and we can talk about them in words and whatever. But underneath all that, I believe there's these layers of the semi-conscious and the unconscious that are operating at the biological level in the way that our brain and is processing things autonomically and then nominating things to come into our attention already affecting our behavior in the forms of feelings and emotions and and all that jazz. Well, to explore that space, I think you got to be trained in some disciplines, which I'm not trained in. So I have a friend and a student who has become a licensed hypnotherapist in the UK, who I'm working with as I am her client in the same way that she's my student, but we're also looking to explore ways in which she can now offer her licensed hypnotherapy, and her particular style of that is really well suited for traders to operate in the world. So I believe that element of psychology is something that now we in the OWL group, which is what we call our little group, can offer that ethically to the people. And then when um, we started talking last week about the emotional freedom technique, it resonated with me because I'd been studying that as an item of interest and curiosity, because there was a lot of it that made a lot of sense to me about being able to operate at the almost the cellular and unconscious level to make positive changes in the way emotions are processed internally and energy is released and behaviors are formed. And it looked to me like there are ways that we get some rapid breakthroughs for folks that are specifically experiencing trauma that keeps appearing in their trading. What I've often seen is that guys who don't deal with some of those fundamental emotional challenges try to suppress it and not change anything, but keep it under wraps. And that pressure just builds like a pressure cooker until at a trigger that you wouldn't expect to be the final straw causes this outpouring of emotions, and guys end up self-sabotaging. And it's because I believe they haven't gone through the repair work or the transformational stuff at the subconscious level to handle that. And so EFT as a sound scientific basis. I believe in Western science. And so when I did my due diligence in there, that was one that had provable therapeutic value. And so, to my surprise, when you said, "Oh yeah, you do EFT," I was like, "Dude, when the student is ready, the teacher appears." So, in general, what we talked about a week ago, and what I've been thinking about is, to recap, is to create a couple levels of courses that we can offer my traders, like the home study course, a guided study course with you, and then maybe leading to individual coaching that you can do. My my offer would be to be able to host that on Rizuku, because I have a lifetime license where I have unlimited courses, unlimited students, unlimited assistant instructors, and at no cost to you, because I've already paid the infrastructure costs. And in terms of our work with the HCU alumni, there's no limit to the paid programs that you can sign up for with their reference partners to provide solutions. There's as much money as you want to spend on that, you can, and they're all good. But I'm of the opinion that you want to get things moving and make things with your hands to lock in the learning of how to put these things together and get them out into the world. And so the work that we do here not only is going to help me with my clients, but and for you, I think it will help you get clarity on what your offers are, what your services are, what that looks like in the mechanics and nuts and bolts of getting it online. And the truth is that whatever learning platform that you end up using, uh, what you put together for Rizuku is going to be easily portable, directly feeding into any other project. Because I've had 3 or 4 different uh, curriculum delivery systems, all of which use the same kinds of web-based, video-based chat and all that stuff. And it's been very easy for me to move my product, if you will, from site to site while I'm trying to find things that suit me. When I found Rizuku and started monkeying around with it, and had the opportunity for that lifetime license, I was satisfied that that was an infrastructure that was robust, easy to use, one-time payment for me that I was willing to eat, and the unlimited courses, students, bandwidth, storage, and assistant instructors was too good to pass up. It's really well designed for the delivery of online curriculum, but also that leverages what I do, like in Zoom, to create content for videos or lessons or podcasts or whatever, and also to accept all kinds of attachments, and the ability to move artifacts from one course to another course is supremely easy. So if I have a slide or a file or a video or a lesson or a module with multiple lessons or even an entire course, it's easy to take any of those pieces and parts and clone them and put them in a new package, or combine courses into a bundle, and then to have instances of it or iterations where I can have, like, the creativity course that I do for the Army is teaching Angus Fletcher's his field guide to creativity, 30 lessons in a book form. But I also can take that and add trading vignettes to each of those 30 lessons. And so it was very easy to make it. What I do for my Army, or for my traders, is the Army officers course plus my trading material. And so I find Rizuku supremely easy when it comes to that kind of production. And I've probably got 5 or 6 assistant instructors now, each of whom has their own courses, by which I mean they own it, they own all the content. The payment infrastructure that's in place has people using their credit cards to pay directly to their bank account. I don't see any of that, and they keep their own records. And I just trust them to send me the referrals uh, when it's because of my referral that they got a client. Then we have an arrangement in there, usually like 20%, so that they are rewarded and are incentivized to make a lot of sales. And then I'm incentivized to help them make sales, because if I can get 20% of the business just by helping to market them, but I don't have to teach. I love that. And plus, as my subordinate instructors, a lot of times they're using pieces and parts of my materials. So if they're ever in a position as a coach or a teacher that they have a question they can't answer, they can, fly me in to answer that. And then it is reinforcing. And so whatever we decide to do together is, whatever makes you happy, but that's sort of the loose federation of allies that are working in these areas. Um, I would see in the areas of psychology, I don't see like competition between the hypnotist or me as a protreptic coach and you as an EFT guy, because I think that clients tend to resonate or need one or the other style. And it's not, well, do this instead of that. No, it's just, it resonates with them in a way that is powerful. So I see it as complementary and supplementary. So that was my
Absolutely.
background. That's all I wanted to say about where we
Yeah.
are in the project and get it
Yeah.
on camera for one.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that those three are not only complementary, but they only have a relatively small amount of overlap in the way
Right.
that they operate. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it really struck me that the EFT was working at the unconscious level, right with the physical sensations that are coming up through the nervous system, through the amygdala, and then going off into emergency room. And that the hypnotherapy and visualization is operating at the semi-conscious level, kind of in the dream state, where you're putting feelings into kind of proto words and concepts and envisioning scenarios and movies. And then what I do at the conscious level with storytelling and protreptic is explicitly kind of wordplay and conscious effort and a lot of rationality and if then and that kind of testing. So it looked to me like all at once I saw that we had the kind of that the three levels of simultaneity or mutual support with a clear distinction between what each one is adding to the overall psychological profile of our traders. I think it hits the cognitive, the emotional, and the practical in strong ways. So, um, yeah. So I did some, and just for the record, for other folks, I sent you the some structured prompts and insights from Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I was pretty happy with what it looked like. It didn't violate my sense of what EFT was with my very limited exposure. So I wanted to share that with you right away to kind of validate, the accuracy or completeness of it. And I think you had a chance to take a look at that already. So
yeah, I
I
did
turn
take
it
a
over
look.
to you there. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I did take a look at it, and it's a very good, because you put it together as an outline rather than having it fill in all the nitty gritty details
Yeah.
at every level. It did a good job of going through the possibilities and exploring those and building a structure that, based on the AI's training, that we can then go in and add the human intelligence on top of
Yeah.
making choices and decisions and all of that. And yeah, it's a great starting document, no doubt about that. Um,
Yeah. As a learning point, the approach to prompt engineering I used on that has become sort of my default approach to prompt engineering in any, complex cognitive area that really starts at the top and tries to get backgrounds, principles, thinkers, models, and a very broad outline, and then go in layer by layer to pinpoint, as opposed to just tell me everything about EFT with no sense of, purpose and all that. But when you give the AI your purpose and intent and your output and your intended audience and the tone of voice you want to represent and what you're trying to achieve, it can it does a very good job of sorting that out. Plus, every time you think you got the prompt right, you just ask it, now, are those instructions clear and consistent, or do you need to ask me clarifying questions? And quite often it'll come back with clarifying questions that really puts a fine tune. So there's actually a learning process that goes along with that style of iterative prompt engineering. And that's in the book on prompt engineering that I wrote with the AI's help, which is kind of eating your own cooking in a sense. So, all right, let's now that we got that out of the way, that's almost kind of the introduction and vision document for the project that unfolds. I would just say I got a couple hundred active subscribers to my Patreon page, which is a subscription site where I publish a daily set of analytical reports. And then I do a nightly strategy podcast where I look at samples of my own trading called the Sniper Trade of the Day. Then I look at students who have posted their trade cases for coaching commentary. Then I review the daily reports for the day and the week ahead. On weekends, I add a little deeper review of the broader market. But that sort of battle rhythm of the daily operations of trading quite often contains little pieces and parts of trading lessons and insights. So that's kind of one. That's the operational side of trading that I'm doing. It's trading as a profession. The other thing that I'm doing is I started coaching this year. I had shied away from coaching because I was uncomfortable in providing the psychological elements of coaching. And I always felt like, look, I've given you the system description and I'll coach you on your particular trades every night, but I don't want to get into, you know, coaching that could bleed into some of these other areas. But I, with the passing of my friend, I decided that I was going to start that this year. So I've been doing true storytelling and creativity, not as a way to specifically talk about trading, but really as a way to raise creativity and do some protreptic coaching. And that has gone really well for a couple years. And that persuaded me to start doing technical coaching on a weekly basis. So right now I got 3 cohorts of guys that are on an annual coaching program. I don't think I would recommend an annual coaching program to folks from HCU because that is a huge time commitment, and I don't think that it takes that long to achieve most coaching outcomes. Because I was starting with that, I wanted to over deliver, and I wanted guys to just say, "Look, I'm going to do this, and I'm willing to commit to a year." And it doesn't make sense to not do it on a weekly basis, given the frequency of that's actually a good battle rhythm for us. And I said, well, my first couple iterations to just kind of feel it out, I elected to do 52 weeks of weekly hour-long sessions with cohorts of about 4 to 5. And so I've got 3 of those cohorts. The original cohort is about 7 months into it, and it's turning out to be really powerful because the fact that they've had the freedom of a full year has allowed them to be relaxed and explore. So I actually don't mind that. And they're all letting me record the sessions, and we're making those sessions available to others. So there's actually production of new teaching material that's involved inside there that's a rich source of future content. The second cohort has been on it for about 3 months. I've got a professional trader that is high speed. I mean, he's a pro money manager for about 30 years. He's managing about 200 million bucks. And so he's got particular perspectives and challenges about his systems and the way he's trading that I'm trying to help him fine tune a couple of very specific techniques, but I'm not doing any tinkering inside his brain except for him to be able to understand how we trade and why that's different than what he's doing. But there's also in that cohort a couple senior business owners that have sold their businesses and are looking to trade full time and have considerable amounts of money that they're working with. So that little cohort kind of works together because they're united by their kind of location and business and life, and they know each other. The third cohort is meeting like every 2 weeks, and one guy's coming in once a month because they're moving at they need that more deliberate pace to work on longer term trading, and the weekly meeting was actually too much pressure on them because they didn't have enough time to actually make the significant changes they wanted, and that was causing a negative consequence in the learning process. And when we backed that off to 2 weeks, and then one guy coming in on a monthly basis with the advice to them that if you need a weekly intervention or a discussion, just shout out, we'll get it done. But the 2 week battle rhythm has actually proven to be the right way to time that. So for those of you listening to this, as you're thinking about how to construct your coaching program, I would start with who your people are and what their change cycle and rhythm is, and what the duration they need in order to feel that the program is adapted to them. And I would trust your gut and your dialogue with your students and coachees first. I would prioritize that. I would take under advisement the things that you're getting from people who teach how to be a coach and have large numbers of generic clients, and they see what works for most people in their other areas. That's a good rule. Those are good rules of thumb, and I wouldn't discount that stuff. And I think, I mean, I did that, and it helped me to think about what was different or special about my clients compared to what the kind of advice that they were getting. They're typically saying things like, hey, a 4 week coaching program or an 8 week coaching program, so that in the course of a year, if I had 8 weeks, I could run 6 sessions and 6 cycles and get my flow through that way, and get 30 people for 8 weeks and do some. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to trade, and I'm trying to teach, and I'm trying to run a community of practice that is really my ideal clients stay with me for life. And so we're trying to build a specific community of practice that incorporates some co-creation, and uh, certainly the community of practice idea attracts certain kinds of coaching clients. I would say it that way. So they're, yeah,
In addition to that, what you're doing is a long, ongoing process that has lots of cycles associated with that process every day.
right.
And your coaching is on optimizing those processes and the people doing those processes, where the typical coaching is we're going to spend 8 weeks trying to get you this outcome or this micro outcome.
Yeah. And your
So
coaching
very
is going to
different.
give me a very specific skill. Thank you very much. Transaction complete. And now I can go off and do my individual isolated thing. It turns out that our community of practice uh, is one of the powerful edges that we have as traders, is because we have so many different perspectives and smaller subgroups of interest that we can mix and match and come together in many groups to solve problems. And so there's actually, that's why I call it almost it's more of a loose federation of independent city states, as opposed to the Persian Empire. Um, and that's why, to me, being the community of practice approach has enabled me to now start coaching the coaches. So I actually want my students, like when they go through they take a couple courses, they develop their own adaptations of those systems, and then they get in the coaching program or the research weekend, and then after a year's worth of intense effort, they present their system with almost at like an academic conference with research and other peer reviewers, and it's kind of a robust system that can be taught in a course. And if they want to teach that as a course, now I help them design and deliver that course, because it turns out that that is a way to learn your own system even better, because you start getting these questions from all over the place, and it makes you put into words and rules the things that you've been just assuming or we're doing unconsciously. I learned that when I started teaching my own courses, that it made me a better trader. It made me understand my systems better. So I'm encouraging these guys to teach, not only so that they can teach, but also that they can learn their own stuff better. So I almost have this kind of like a reverse funnel where I teach guys to trade, and if it sort of resonates with them, move them towards being a teacher, and then I can coach them on how to be a coach if they want to, because I understand their systems so well, because many of them are derived from my first principles. I can act as a coach if they don't want to, or I can help somebody else study their system, figure out what it is that a person needs to be coached on, and then I have another person coach for a guy who just wants to, he published his home study course and wants, that's enough. So there's different levels about how guys can do this stuff, to the point now where I got a couple, got Phil and Griff, who if they interned for me, they listened to thousands of hours of my lectures, wrote consolidated notes for those. We wrote a couple books together. Then they built a course, and now they actually reached out to a couple other communities of practice, got a collaboration going, and now we're in the middle. Tomorrow or Sunday, I'm teaching the course with them on swing trading to that entirely new group of students, all of whom are going to be candidates for the kind of educational and psychological services that we offer. There's a couple thousand people in the downtrace of this toolkit that a guy put together. He was a Microsoft engineer, supreme wizard with Excel, built this analytical framework for screening and back testing all different kinds of systems. And he's modeled a bunch of the systems of other kind of famous traders so that people that want to trade in that way can use that template. Well, my guys reached out to him and say, "Hey, here's Ken's material." And he was interested. So he did a major upgrade to his software, incorporated about a half a dozen of my swing trade patterns and analytics. So we got all that built in Excel. And it was easy because I use Excel in my analysis. So the kind of guys that approach him are wireheads, but he doesn't offer anything like performance coaching or emotional development or emotional treatment. And so that whole pile of a couple thousand traders would be likely candidates for the kind of work and services that in the OWL group we offer, which includes how to trade. They've got my templates, but they don't know the details on how to trade them. And I can help them improve performance. And I can also help them by connecting them with you and my hypnotist if they have psychological need for that kind of work.
Right.
So I'm looking to, what's that now?
What's a wirehead?
An introverted digital engineering expert, Spock, a Vulcan,
Got it.
a person who's has a cyborg brain like
Got
me,
it. Okay.
and we affectionately call ourselves wireheads
Got it.
because like one of the guys who was the original programmer for TradeStation, which is a legendary trading platform. He was the first guy to make a living coding other people's systems for them, and wrote about an 800-page book on that. He put together a bundle of software templates in TradeStation for my material, and he came out for 48 hours out here in Kansas, and we spent 2 full days in a hotel room with a USB cable between our heads and just transmitting as fast as I could describe it in math. He was coding it on the fly, and in 2 days we did a year's worth of work because our brains were wired in that way. So anyway, this what we're doing with EdgeRater is opening up whole new categories of potential pre-screened clients. Because if you spent $1,000 for a lifetime license for that Excel package of that guy, you are of the mindset to trade professionally. And I have expertise in research and statistics and trading systems and all that stuff, and then ways to implement. So in the 30 years that I was working with my other business partner on the side, I mean, I was a active duty Army officer and a professor for the Army, and I kind of did that just for intellectual stimulation and a business on the side, and just I felt it made me a better teacher, and I found it personally challenging and rewarding, kept me sharp, and it became a lucrative business. But his name was why people were going to those workshops. I mean, he was, charging guys $5,000 for a weekend workshop for me to teach. And he sort of certified that I was good. So people would come. And I would get either 25% and then later 50% of the tuition. And he was my method of, you know, getting new clients. I didn't spend any time on client acquisition. I didn't sort of just kind of stayed away from it. It was a good trade-off because I didn't have to do any of that. But now with his passing, I've sort of had to, when I realized he was not feeling well, I had a premonition. So I started laying the groundwork for me to do kind of marketing and outreach on my own. So I started planning a series of books. And then with his untimely passing, those books came along just sort of at the right time to fill the gap with his passing. Because when he first started, he was legendary as a book author, a psychologist for traders. And so he had a dozen books that would draw people to his workshops where he connected them with traders like me. And he filled in the psychological pieces and we filled in the systems pieces. And I realized that I needed to fill that gap in order to continue to grow the business and expand in other areas and to go outside of his his email list, if you will, because he probably had 10 or 15,000 people, I suppose, his immediate active client list. He's probably had sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his book, and he's well known in the industry. But I needed to start. That's why I've been really pushing myself to complete my books. To do that, I needed to have my instructors take over the teaching load for me so that I could be free to document some of these other things and create the larger artifact. So that really was what kind of prompted me in this workshop and the HCU to take the HCU course to make sure that I had a complete view of course creation from a commercial point of view. I had good exposure to that through technical trading workshops and then my job as a curriculum designer for the Army. So that got me connected to HCU. The HCU alumni is sort of my paying it forward in service to others to say, look, it will always be free to the folks that are in the HCU alumni to come in. This is just a workplace, and anything that I've learned, I'm willing to just share and document. And it really is sort of an artifact-based approach to generating content all the way up into books, into courses, into building clientele. That picture in my background there, the mill, is part of our conceptual ecosystem of a village comes together and creates a mill next to the river because of what it collectively does for the community of practice. And it frees up the whole community to take their individual crops and then process it in a large way, and later becomes the engine by which the industrial revolution comes along. Because that wheel will not only just turn a millstone, but you can put a drive shaft on it and then take power takeoff straps to run spinning jennies and sewing machines and any kind of power driven machine that you need. So that is sort of the model, the icon that represents our approach to industrial scale production of trading. Is that we take that very mechanistic and industrial approach to the way we trade. I grew up in the world of automobile parts manufacturing. So I come from that kind of quality control, statistical process control, scale and leverage and tools, the guild of master craftsmen, if you will. That's sort of the mentality that I bring. So guys that are wired like that, it's kind of easy for me to coach them in that way. But other folks that are coming maybe from more of an artistic perspective or different points of view, I have not always been the best coach for them. And I would sort of say, well, I hope you find someone that could. But my thought is, in conclusion, is that between the hypnotherapy and the EFT and what I do with protreptic coaching, we offer a kind of a robust way to help traders for lifetime of performance. And then I would also say, once we get you installed on Rizuku and your courses, it's very easy for you to build out whatever it is that you want to do. And we can have a separate agreement on what you want to do on that. I'm happy to, to resource your infrastructure for some small taste of, as long as you find it convenient. It's easy to grow that way. And then in the future, what I would say is, I think everybody should always be looking at kind of infrastructure and information independence. Like I have a plan in place to continue my business after my death. I'm trying to persuade my son to take that on, so that he can be financially independent and just keep the administration of the machine going. But I would always say, as an insurance and as a risk manager, always have a plan for what your infrastructure could look like, so you're not waiting for the time you need it to start thinking about it. And so in the meantime, what I would just say is, it's a good idea in my view to get comfortable with Rizuku, because it's kind of a common platform in terms of procedures, and the way they do things would be similar to what I've seen on all the other learning platforms. Like it's just easier to do it. Like I've got experience with Blackboard and a couple other ones that the Army uses, and I had some commercial ones. I've already forgotten their names because they sucked, and it was hard to do. You couldn't mix and match and adapt very easily, and they were only operating kind of on a monthly subscription basis with different levels of support depending on how many subscribers you had and how many courses you had. And you couldn't have if you wanted to add assistant instructors, it was scale. And I was spending, for the level of support that I have with Rizuku right now, I could easily be spending $2,000 a month just to operate with the number of courses and students I have. And the difference between $0 and $2,000 a month just in infrastructure is $2,000 a month. That's a part-time employee for free, essentially. So, and those prices would have kept going up in the future. So when I saw the lifetime deal, I can do the math. I understand economic value and life cycle costs. That's what I do for the Army. So I grabbed that one. I grabbed the koala writer, the lifetime deal on that one. So if you got stuff that you like, bulk production that you need, I get 2.5 million words a month of essay writing and 15,000 iterative chat messages. I mean, and the books that I've been writing now was basically like every prompt that you saw in there, that was not an essay. That was just a prompt and one text chunk reply. I get 15,000 of those a month. And on my most prolific month, I'm using maybe 10% of my capacity. So,
Good to know.
if you got, workload that you want to get done, the thing has a bulk essay writer. Like I did one where I said, hey, AI, give me the top 100 trading psychologists in the world ever. Done. I said, now give me the top 10 insights that each one of those 100 guys is known for. Done. I said, now do a compare and contrast and group them together by cluster. Organize those 1,000, because it's 100 times 10, organize those 1,000 insights and group them together by similarity and identity. And then give me the top 50 biggest ideas that most of the guys were talking about. And that was, most of them had, there was a very clear cluster that everybody agrees on. So that went into my first book, was I then say, now, what does each one of those guys, if you read all of their material and you saw that this was the top 20 issues, let's say, what would be the consensus ways of getting better at those 20 things that all of these guys, and then give me the references of each guy that comments on that and put that into 20 lessons. So I've got a practical trading psychology program built out that was just built on that. Well, what I did on the bulk writer was, once I got that list of 100 guys, I could give it a standard prompt and then say, now iterate that prompt for these 100 guys and grind away in the background. It took 3 days to grind that whole list out, which I could then, download and process and then query. So, if you find yourself in the need for that kind of work, the Koala Writer can help there too. Now, I've got a couple of my guys, the first two guys who set up the Rizuku courses to teach their own courses. If we get to the point where you want to, you need to do some work in Rizuku and have some technical questions, how do I do this? I'll connect you with Phil and Griff, and they're probably better and quicker at answering technical questions than I am, because they're closer to it from a end user point of view, whereas I will over explain everything. But they're good guys to work with, and a refreshing change of pace. Now, they're also, I added them to our little base camp workspace, because they are very familiar with book writing, artifact creation, Zoom, Rizuku, and coaching, and I believe would be valuable contributors to the work that we're all kind of doing in this space. Plus, I want them to learn the things that we're talking about. Like, I want them to listen to what I just said, to sort of capture the, where I see everybody fitting in, for the OWL group, because you're not just in the HCU alumni. There's a open door there for you to connect, to hitch your wagon to the wagon train that we've got. You're welcome to travel with us as long and as far as you want. That's the idea of the trail boss was an important part of that, my little production model and performance model. And that's I take that approach when I'm doing academic research, as well as the trading community of practice, but also at the military college. That's psychologically and technically, I'm well suited to do that kind of work. I was a pretty good Army commander, but I was an outstanding chief of staff and project manager. That was really because I get to do all the work, that I don't have to deal with the people so much. I don't really like the people that much. So that's enough for me. By far too much. I would rather not have. In the future, I won't hog the microphone. What is it that we can do tonight, or anything you want to talk about that'll get us kind of moving? My expectation is that, each week we kind of just check in, and what has each one of us done on our mutual projects? Is there any sticky points that we can get help with, or, success, kind of like what we do on Thursday night too. But this is also a place where we can do actual work.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate what you've shared and the offers you've made. So thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be a part of a community, as opposed to just me hanging out under a tree and all by myself with nobody
Sure.
around. So I spend way too much time like that as it is.
Yeah.
Um,
What might be helpful, let me interrupt you already, is you've heard my sort of backstory. And since some of the guys in the OWL group that would probably be working with you. Like I could see Phil and Griff teaching a course and then having a guy that needs EFT coaching, and then they would just reach out and talk to you directly. So maybe this is a good chance for you to introduce yourself to them. I'm going to have them do the same thing and plunk it in this area too, so that you can see who else you're working with there.
And um, there, what I was looking at after having read the document that you sent,
Yep.
One of the ways that I have been trained loosely to approach creating content and approach creating products in particular is to start by writing the sales letter. Because once you've got the sales letter written, you know what the product has to do.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I was starting out with this afternoon. I was using some of the tools that I've got access to. And so in looking at that and then listening to what you were talking about, there were some terms that I obviously need to learn a lot more about. Like, I don't know what a high frequency trader is, swing trading.
Yeah.
You mentioned Edge Rater, and I'm assuming that's the software.
Yeah, that's the software that my buddy uses. I'm going to send you my book, by the way, book number 1, which kind of gives a kind of our background. In a nutshell, there's day traders who have no overnight risk, who are trading between 1 and 50 times a day. Their holding duration is measured in minutes or hours, and they are probably using leverage. To get large position sizes times a small move gives you a big payoff, but that comes with risk that has physiological consequences.
Right.
Swing traders carry overnight risk. They trade from 2 to 10 days typically, and it normally results from a temporary anomaly in price and value. There's a disconnect between where the price is and where it ought to be because of a new piece of news.
Okay.
It could have been a bunch of guys got scared and all exited at a rush, and that drove the price way, way down because buyers sense their fear and lowball them. And these guys got to get out of that position at any cost. And so they end up selling at 70 cents on the dollar. And so if you are a swing trader, one of the things that you can do when you see that behavior is you can become part of the few that have emotional state control and recognize value on sale, and you buy it cheap, and then you let the fear and panic and the fire subside. And then when it returns something like back to normal, then you get. Now, are you right, or were the fearful people right? Well, sometimes, yeah. So there's a risk associated with buying things on a fire sale. You're in the fire.
Right.
Now, there's other guys who do swing trading, maybe of a longer term, where they say, this company has potential. It's not realized yet, but I have every reason to believe they could scale and become amazing. And so I'm going to buy them now cheap when they don't have earnings, against a promise of a stream of future payments. And when they're mature, then like Microsoft and a cash printing machine, I will have bought them at a place where now I can reap that rewards by being early enough. That is typically not a swing trade. That's a position trade. That's going to be a long-term. So the 3 categories we would see is short-term day trading, swing trading, that kind of 1 or 2 weeks of temporary anomaly that gets resolved and it gets back to fair value pretty quickly. And then we get a lot of inventory turn. So as long as I can do that every 2 weeks, I get a lot of buying and selling, and I'm harvesting that as I go short term. I'm almost the middleman between the short term sellers and the long term guys that want to own that. The position traders, you're trying to find relative strength ideas that are going to have a competitive advantage for months and quarters and years, or a long-term guy that's going to grow and expand an acorn into an oak tree. Each one of those has their own emotional states and methods and whatnot. I have systems and courses that teach all three. I
Mhm.
also teach an adaptive style that incorporates insights from all of those and blends it into a meta system, a complete equity management system that takes the strengths of each time frame and covers the weaknesses of the other time frames, which then protect your weaknesses. Um, so that's some of the background in about trading and who our people are. And I'll send you the book. It reads pretty quickly, and I will also send you the. We did a 8 week, I think it was 8 week session of hourly Q&A sessions on each segment of the book that synthesizes and summarizes it with a note sheet, and then that has become a course. So you take the book that's written in a modular way and then teach to the modules and then run a pilot program where the guys get to buy the book and a very low cost set of Q&A sessions with the agreement that they let us publish that. And then I can sell that now. I charge them 97 for getting their personal questions answered for 10 weeks. And then I can sell that now for 297 to people that just want to listen to the Q&A. Oh, if you want your own questions added to that list, now you're going to pay me $497 because you're getting my personal time and I'm answering your personal questions. So one of the ways that you can build that out is the pilot can become the better version of it, and then it starts cascading, and then each future session makes the home study course even better. Uh, I wanted to say this about the sales letter. That's exactly the right way to do it. You start with the end in mind. What I did with that was very clarifying, that kind of really launched me into Koala Writer, because I was making a decision about whether or not I could see if it had a utility for me. In retrospect, I even have to laugh. Well, of course it does. Just look what I'm doing. But at the time, my proof of principle was I had just done the HCU lessons on defining your perfect, imagine your perfect client.
Right.
And then what do they want and all that stuff. And then they say, go out and find those people, then ask them what they want, and then write material. So what I did with the Koala Writer in about 1 hour was I said, do a survey of Dr. Ken Long's work in public. What is he known for? The top 10 things. I said, now describe to me the ideal client who would ask Dr. Ken Long for those kinds of services. What is a psychological profiles of a number of clients who would contract with me for service and support? So it defined a bunch of buckets of people that would be interested in my work. I then said, now, given those buckets of people and given what he is, what would be their expectations that they could get from that? What is it that they think he teaches that has an immediate payoff in their life, and why? So in their words, they would take that course so that they could whatever. And then I said, now write me a marketing sales letter designed for each one of those buckets. Are you the kind of person who, well, then you might be interested in this, and here's why. And then it wrote that whole thing. I got that done in about an hour, and it was better than anything that I produced going through the HCU process in weeks. And only because I got out of my own head. And there was a synergy and a buildup. So in about an hour, I completed essentially that whole set of modules in HCU. And I was persuaded that you can go faster. And that's what actually the kind of forward thinking that produced that EFT booklet, what I did with Joy on the confident communications, and in any number of other things that I'm doing for the Army. And so, yeah, if that's something that you would like to do, we could do that as an exercise in Koala very easily. It would sort of need you to have like a public presence that it could review. Like I already had a website with and several thousand videos on YouTube in the public space and a bunch of marketing material that was around from my partner's website. So I sort of already had a public footprint. If you have that, we could just do that. If you don't have one yet, but you have written material of your own, we could sort of use that as a proxy for kind of who your ideal clients might be and why they would be interested in your work, and then what their expectations of value would be.
Yeah.
That could be pretty handy. So, and it doesn't even, to be honest, it doesn't even have to be you personally. Because if you say, I have a generic professional competent authority on EFT, find me 10 examples of that in the world. Summarize what they offer. Identify the people that are ideal clients. Describe the value add for each of the separate demographics you generate. And then that would tell you which of those demographic sets that you want to write for. Because you don't have to service them all, but you might want to just
Yeah.
do some of them. So that might be a useful. I could do that this weekend if you'd be interested in that.
Okay. Well, what I've been looking at so far is creating topic-based solutions based on the things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And then putting together a handful of those, and in essence, the follow-on being a conglomeration of a wide variety of topics under the guises of fix my life because I've got these problems.
Yeah.
So most people,
Sort of the salad bar approach
exactly.
or delicatessen.
Yeah, exactly. Because most of the people, the tool can be applied across a wide variety of things.
Yeah.
And once you get the fundamental perspective that I have, you see how it can be applied across all of those with much higher leverage than the way EFT is regularly taught.
Do you have like a 1-page summary of your recipe and your general approach to cooking?
Not yet. That's one of the things that
I would start drifting or converging on that because that's going to end up being the next level down of your brand. So your brand is going to kind of be a paragraph description. And
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay is a cook of a certain type. And then Gordon Ramsay says, these are the kinds of ways that I cook. Now,
Yeah.
I described about 4 different buckets of trading that I do, the short term, midterm, long term, and the hybrid and performance coaching. So I might have like 5 chunks. But I have a brand that sits kind of on top of all that encompasses all of them. So as you think about one of the best ways to get back to your brand is to start out at that middle level at the recipe, the process level. And then I'm a person who cooks in this way. And the way I think about cooking as a part of my life or as an approach or what characterizes my style of cooking becomes your brand statement. And that's going to be at the emotional, mostly at the emotional level. What is it like? I'm a person who cooks like this, and these are the kinds of meals I provide. This is what it's like in my restaurant. This is what it's like in my wood shop. This is what it's like to work with me. What you walk in with typically, what happens while you're in there, what surprises you when you come out. You, the surprises and the benefits and the confidence builders, some of those emotional connections to what it's like to be in there. Like in the world of martial arts, there are some dojos that are that's where you go if you're a meat eater and you want to be fighting from your life against carnivores and people are getting hurt as part of the learning. That's one style. There's other dojos that said we start with a community that is safe and nurturing and helpful, but focused on performance to get stronger in a healthy way that is tailored to who you are and where you're at and how you learn and learning at your pace. And we're here to support that growth in whatever form that takes. Fast guys over here, slower guys over there, kids here. This is a kids safe, friendly, that kind of stuff. So,
Right.
so at, that's the third artifact. So there's the collection of recipes that describe succinctly the techniques. There's the top level brand that is what you would be known for and your style in general, a description. And then the third part of that is the feels. What does it feel like to work with me in our space or in this community of practice? You typically come here feeling like this. You find that we're people that are like that. The work is performed in a certain way. The results happen, and this is how you feel about them. And, when you're done, it's usual to feel this kind of way about these people that you were working. That's sort of the reassurance and you're checking the fit. How does that suit? It looks good in the mirror, but how does it feel when I put it on?
Right.
The shoe looks good. That's the best way. The shoe looks really beautiful from the outside, and it's at a price I can afford. But what's it like to walk in those shoes? Oh man, they pinch my, or no, they're really, yeah. And I can walk 1,000 miles in them, that kind of stuff. So, I would think about those three categories of organizing your content and your message, and then the messaging just naturally emerges from that. And it becomes your style guide and the tone of voice that you adopt as you deliver. And what I've found is so I've got a koala prompt, which says, imagine you wrote a bucket full of those short statements, and then you put them into a stack and you said, hey, AI, I'm going to feed you a stack of my writing. I want you to describe that style and turn it into a style sheet so that those are my most authentic self brand. I want you to stylize that and then write my material in the best way that reflects that authentic me. When I did that thing writes more like me than I do. And it's like, God damn, that's me all over. It's like, so that's, I have a prompt in that, in the, in that prompt engineering book at the end that shows how to do that. And we crank that out in an hour in Koala once we get there. But I think you getting those little short chunks written and visualize, and we can use the Koala to help with that when you get some ideas and build it out and learn to tune it. We could end up coming up with that kind of style guide pretty quickly. So if you have some EFT guideposts or, content or bodies of knowledge that you like on the web that sort of represent, your tone and your voice and your style and your offerings and your skills, then we could treat that as your visible public profile, with the intention that that's the profile that I'm going to build out anyway. So that's my design. Whether you have it manifested yet or not, that's your blueprint. And then you just live to that blueprint, and we can get on with that. And then you don't have to build it up from scratch. I think that's a really important lesson for the other folks that might be listening on HCU, is that if you've got an ideal archetype, sort of your shining star, the one you want to be like that when you grow up, let's name it and get it styled, and then write in that tone, and then live towards being that person. That's how you start putting those clothes on, is imagining it and then putting it on and going. So there's something in there that bears thinking about. All right, what else can we do tonight?
Good question. I think probably
what I need next week is sort of your backstory, or you could give it to me now if you want. I want, like the other guys that are in the trading group, who would probably be the the trading teachers and coaches that would be referring people to you.
Right.
And so if you start just kind of articulating that, this is almost protreptic in that style. Just give me your life story and give me that messaging. And I don't say we'll clean it all up, but we can turn that into like I can take that snippet, run it through Dragon, speech to text,
Yep.
and then train the koala to clean that up and stylize it or whatever. We'll see how that goes.
Right.
Yes.
So, I guess since you said starting with your life history, I'll go ahead and do that. Um, my parents, how far back? What do I want to put in this? That's the
How'd you
real.
get it? Well, start with why you're here doing this kind of work, and then you can work in both directions. Whoops. You can
Yeah,
work in both directions. Start
sure.
with why this, what brought you to offering this as your professional service to others?
Well, I used to be an electrical engineer. I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and my ex-wife is an electrical engineer. My dad, my two brothers, two of my nephews are electrical engineers. All of my kids are in the medical field, however. Um, and so very logical, very linear to a large extent. And turns out that um, my wife ended up having a 10-year affair with my best friend. And well, while we were married. And by the time I figured all of that out, she had been gaslighting me and telling me I was the problem. And so, being a problem solver, I went out and tried to solve the problem. I perceived it must be something with me because you keep pointing in this direction. And so I ended up running across emotional freedom techniques or tapping and found it to be extremely useful. Ended up working with a personal growth and trauma counselor around all kinds of stuff in my history. My parents were nice, but they were born in 1921 and 1922 and have been through the Depression and all of that. And so they were not really great um, parents in terms of emotional support since they had no clue what that was like.
Yeah.
My dad grew up in Eastern Oregon on an orchard as an only child. So he's out in the middle of the sticks with just his parents. So, yeah, all of that kind of stuff. So emotional neglect was my childhood.
Yeah.
I was also
We didn't even know it was neglect back then.
exactly. I was the fourth kid, and by almost 11-year gap, and so between me and my older brother, and so I basically, we haven't killed these other three yet, so
Yeah.
we must be doing something.
I think it's in the same way that when guys were making the first moving pictures, they didn't think of that as, well, we're going to make black and white pictures. No,
Right.
they were just making pictures because that's how it was. They had no idea that color was the thing
Yeah.
that you could even have, so you
Yeah.
didn't even miss it.
Yeah, because back then you couldn't. They hadn't figured out
Yeah.
the technology yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, so um, started working on myself a whole bunch and ended up getting trained by Gary Craig. Went to multiple of his workshops, went through his certification program. So I have my EFT certification one through his program. Um, and over the years have been using it with myself and a bunch of other people I've come in contact with. And the last day I worked as an electrical engineer was 08, 08, 08, after getting laid off from the job that I'd hoped to retire from by a manager who was systematically getting rid of every person who worked for her, who had all the institutional knowledge and the relationships with the customers, but she was trying to save the company money or something like that on her own because nobody was directing her to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was
Yeah.
that
Not
was,
all plans are good.
yeah, that was the end of my engineering career. And so ended up eventually, well, 2008 was the beginning of another one of those
Yep.
downturns in the economy. And I ended up helping my dad because he was old and frail, and he ended up passing, and I got a bit of an inheritance. And so I tried my hand at internet marketing stuff. And when you don't know what you're doing and you really aren't an entrepreneur per se, you can being an entrepreneur is a great way to make a large fortune much smaller.
Right. If
And
you want to,
so,
if you want to be a millionaire, want to make $1 million in the airline industry, be a billionaire and buy an airline.
exactly, exactly. But in the end, I got to the point where I had lost my identity as an engineer, didn't know what to do, all of those kinds of things. And so I went and I saw a counselor and told him, you know, what I'd really like to do is just insert myself into somebody else's business and do this tapping thing to help people. And he said, well, why don't you go get your master's? And I went, huh? 6 weeks later, I was on campus in Alamosa, Colorado at Adams State University, getting my master's in clinical mental health, having moved there. And
what's the bachelor's requirement for that?
That you have one.
Got it. Okay.
So
Master
yeah,
of Clinical
Master
Psychology,
of Clinical Mental Health.
Clinical Mental Health.
Yeah. And so
That's on my mind these days.
Yeah. So I had at that point 16 years of experience with emotional freedom techniques. And I knew what I could do for people in short order already. And getting my master's meant that I could charge insurance companies to do what I was already doing,
Right.
which was the motivator behind doing all of this, because you have to have a license to do it. And so what I found was that what they were teaching us in that master's program, and as far as I can tell, all clinical mental health master's programs, is pretty much bullshit, because they've got really lousy interventions that really don't work very well. They have you think about your problem, which actually just re-triggers a lot of it as opposed to making it better. And so I was helping my clients while everybody else was just re-stimulating theirs. I was extremely fortunate to work in the on-campus student counseling center, both my practicum and my 2 semesters as in my internship, and was able to help quite a few people with quite a number of challenges as my clients. So that was great fun. Anyway, so that's how I got into the position that I am. And I've always liked helping people. I've done international technical support and that sort of thing. And so just like helping, like working with people, I ended up realizing I like to work with people a lot more than I like working with technology. So, and then with the additional trainings I've had from a wide variety of people, both in the healings arts as well as internet marketing stuff, I've come to realize that probably what I really would like to do at this point, because I'm 63, almost 64 now, is to create, in essence, legacy programs that are standalone training and self-help programs based on tapping that can help people improve their life in a major way very quickly. And the big thing about the way that I start looking at things versus what we were taught in school. In school was all about, well, Freud said this and Adler said this, and you know, all of these people who are dead and gone had theories, but they didn't really address the problems or try and really talk about the roots other than, tell me about your mother, you know.
Yeah.
So I come at it from the standpoint of all life has a single prime directive, which is to survive. How do we learn how to survive? By spotting danger at a distance so that we can stay away from it. And then looking at how do we understand what's dangerous and the patterns of danger that end up creating the
Yeah.
all the rest of that. So the long discussion to get it right. But anyway, so I always look at things from that prime directive and from the standpoint of here's the behavior. What is a potential reason for that behavior that's based in it's dangerous, and what could that thing be that needs to be changed, the emotional charge taken off of those memories that frees the person up to no longer respond that way. And so there are all kinds of things that one, unless you have seen it before, you'd never guess. Like your grandmother's attitude about money may be why you're a financial failure.
Yeah.
And the whole generational trauma thing, and uh, the prime directive of survive says it's not safe to go against the tribe because we'll be kicked out of the tribe and die. And so we have to go along with what the tribe says. And that operates in so many different levels of the subconscious. It's not even funny.
Tell me about licensing and and counseling as a profession.
So in order to get a state license, you have to have a master's degree, and then it varies from state to state, but you have to have a certain number of supervised hours of client counseling plus a bucket load of working in that position hours as well. And so varies from state to state, and I ended up being able to get mine working 14 months at community mental health here in town. And the poverty mentality that goes along with community mental health is just astounding. Also, most of the people who are working there have gotten into that in order to try and figure out how they ended up there. So we all have history of trauma that led us to try and fix that trauma. And so they end up closer to their trauma patterns in their jobs than one would have ever expected. And the people who tend to stay in clinical mental health, in community mental health for long periods of time tend to stay there because they think it's safe, and they aren't the industry leaders either. Because by going out and creating your own private practice or joining a larger organization, you can make a whole lot more money. As an intern, I started at $19.50 an hour. And by the time I was done 14 months later, I was at $20.49 an hour, or 51 cents an hour, with a master's degree, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's tough sledding.
Yeah. So, but they know they've got you over a barrel because you've got to get those supervised hours. And few places, it appears, will take you without an independent license. But it turns out, realistically, as long as you've got supervision, you can actually start your private practice fresh out of school, which I didn't realize.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if I had it to do again, I would have done it that way. And so my last day working in community mental health was January 3rd of 2020. I quit because I got my hours, could get my license, and had planned on opening a private practice. And a couple of months later, before I was able to do that, COVID hit and everybody's life got turned on their head. And so I never actually ended up creating a private practice. The other thing that happened is the real estate market went bananas. And as a result, the houses that I owned went up in price. And so I found out that I didn't have to work anymore. So now that I have sold my other house, uh, my bank account is far more liquid than it was when it was tied up in the house, which makes life easier at this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got an attitude when it comes to the industry because I could see what I could do effortlessly. And the couple of times I touched in with the industry and had been to see counselors for a few weeks, they were basically worthless. You know, it got me nothing. So I got from the industry what I needed to be able to do what I think I wanted.
Tell me about like professional considerations for providing counseling / therapy, whichever the right word for that is, uh, for traders that want to work with you. Like, for instance, when I do the hypnotherapy with my friend, she's a certified hypnotherapist and can perform whatever that treatment, therapeutic treatment is. What kind of restrictions or opportunities are there for you, given a combination of teaching, coaching, but also therapeutic counseling? Because I see those as different
Right.
levels of service or offerings. How
Yeah,
does that affect the way you look at this?
absolutely. I don't know what the laws are in. I think you said your friend is
I'm in
in UK.
Kansas, but my spider sense is that whatever the
Oh,
laws are in Colorado, you're in Colorado, right? Still
no, I'm Washington State.
Washington. My spider sense is that if you're operating out of Washington, you'd have to comply with that state, and then whatever you could offer online, they probably have some state regulation that governs how to conduct business digitally that you'd have to
To
comply with. Is my
to a
guess.
certain extent, yeah. So coming back to the hypnotherapy that your friend is doing for you, I don't know if that is a licensed practice in England. I don't think hypnotherapy is
It
a
is
licensed.
in England, but not in the States.
Right. Okay. So there's some differences there. So it's probably more similar to psychotherapy here in the States in that there is a licensing board, there's a set of ethics, there's a set of laws that say you can do this and you can't do that. And confidentiality with HIPAA and all of that is a thing when it comes to creating a client practitioner relationship. And so there is um, there are continuity requirements and abandonment problems and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the way that some people work is they have a counseling practice and they have a coaching practice, and they're very clear in terms of their separation of them. And some of the counselors end up dropping their counseling practice in favor of the coaching practice because they can do things in a different way
Yep.
that's more convenient and has fewer restrictions. So also as a Washington State licensed mental health counselor, I can only work with people who are in Washington State geography. Okay. If they drive over into Oregon 5 miles away and we have a phone call because they're in Oregon, I am apparently breaking Oregon's laws because I'm not licensed in Oregon.
Right. I understand that.
And so that becomes potentially problematic, which is why stepping back from the counseling relationship and into a coaching relationship makes things potentially easier.
Yeah. So I'm going to need, well, you'll obviously need to think your way through the scope of services offered, taking
Right.
into account all that stuff. And then we got to make sure that we're very clear on that in the course offerings about what it is and what it is not, and where the boundary conditions are. Like if
Right.
it crosses, if it starts approaching this line, then what we've got to do is this,
Right.
I have to refer you or whatever. And I had to go through that in the ICF coaching, was to understand, the very clear boundaries about what coaching is and is not.
Right.
And what the work that you can do is obviously much deeper than sort of life coaching and
Right.
being a good neighbor. So
Yeah.
we just got to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I believe that I can do, and I should probably check in to see where the boundaries are on it, is in terms of demonstrating, particularly for groups, um, based on input from someone, for example.
Yeah.
The idea being that this is a demonstration and here's how it's done, as opposed to we're doing therapy with you now. And I'm sure that's gray in some areas and I need to figure it out. But the other thing that I'm looking at is, in my head at least, if I have a training that has repeat after me tapping in it, that would be a demonstration or an opportunity for someone to do their own work, modeling it on what I'm showing.
Yeah.
Because in my view, therapy requires a two-way conversation.
Right.
And a pre-recorded piece is a one-way conversation.
Yeah. Demonstration for educational purposes.
Right.
Sign the waiver.
Yeah. And so
That makes sense.
That's one of the questions that I have wanted to actually run upstairs to the licensing board so that I can get a determination of if I do this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, so that's that gets to the, the scope and style and content, and I'll trust you to do that work. Okay. Got it. I feel good about where we are.
Okay.
I want to respect your time. We're coming up on 7.
Okay.
And I got to get ready for my 8:30. So next steps, I think I'm going to run through that, try to do that kind of market research and profiling of the EFT and thinkers and whatever, just so the generic language. That's a good way to start generating, content
Right.
and the word web around the ideas.
Mhm.
And then if you can give me some like exemplars of excellence that we want to model in language and presentation, then I can use that to help create that sort of that dialogue about what is it that you offer, what kind of people would be attracted to that, what would their
Right.
expectations properly be,
Right.
if they understood what EFT was and the difference between coaching and counseling, and still wanted to come work with an EFT person, what
Right.
would their legitimate, appropriate expectations be?
Right.
Not
And
their
I was
misguided ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually approaching it from a different aspect, which is what are the problems that the traders have and recognize they have, that
Yeah.
they don't care if you can solve the problem by them standing on their head and whistling Dixie.
Right. Yeah. If they were agnostic onto if they were concerned about behavior modification as opposed to deep academic understanding of the,
Yeah,
just if they were effects and results oriented, and if you could fix this with a simple, by juggling 5 minutes a day without having to know, could you do that and accept the results of your own eyes without having to a master's degree in clinical psychology to explain why it works? Would you be
yeah,
satisfied with the results?
yeah,
Explanation to follow? Yeah.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
kind of put that I could put that into the profile of the kind of person who would be attracted to that
Yeah,
too. Yeah, that'll
and
help.
that's what I was looking at, is in terms of what are the problems that the traders have, and I was just starting to look at some of that, and
Yeah.
um,
You'll see
you know,
that in my book too.
okay,
When I send you that book, it's going to talk a little bit about what kind of things can they overcome. I can also pull that out of the um, some of the prep materials that I did.
yeah,
I think because what I want to do is I think I want to rewrite some of those sections on the psychology of it anyway, with the advancements in Claude 3.5. It's so much better that there may actually be a more succinct and penetrating view of those, and that'll give you a nice. Let me work on that.
yeah,
And when I'm satisfied that we got the top 20 identified, then I think we can. That'll give you
yeah,
some. That'll give you some grist for the mill.
right. So, what are the top 20 or 25
Yeah,
phrases that they will recognize,
yeah,
and what are the definitions, so I understand what
yeah.
that
In the
phrase means?
traders, how would a trader describe this kind of a problem
Right,
in words that humans would understand?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, I
yeah,
mean,
that I can do.
yeah.
All right, boss. You have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks, you too.
See you Thursday night, and you can always send me a note if something comes up early or whatever. Just but see you Thursday night for just kind of check in, and next Friday for work.
Sounds good.
Good stuff. I'll send the. I'm gonna post. I'm gonna produce this. I'll put it in a unlisted video. Is there anything that we covered tonight that you would rather not have uh in transparent? Like I could
Um,
cut it off if you felt I we all have stories of our lives and how we got here.
yeah,
And
and,
that's part of the desensitization of it. Is like
right.
it feels to me like you've addressed it and
Yeah,
are have come to terms with it. I mean,
yeah,
we've known each other for 9 days and you told me the story, so
right.
what's
And
hard?
the thing that I'll put it this way, I'm not the proudest of, is my attitude about the industry. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very true, and that's how I feel. But I don't need to shove it in anybody's face.
I have opinions on my professional peers and the army itself.
Yes,
I am not I am a two-sided advocate for it, but also a strong advocate for change,
yes,
and am kind of a gadfly when it comes to being a advocate for change because I care enough about it that I stay with it even when it pisses me off royally.
right.
So I had an event like that just this morning.
Ah, yes. Those are the ones where you want to tell somebody to their face, "Don't go away, Matt. Just go away."
Well, it was so bad that I wrote a note of what I would say to this guy. A friend of mine wrote a lesson. This guy was pushing back on went well beyond the level of rational discourse. It was goddamn stupid. And so I wrote a reply and sent it to him. I said, now pick and choose the pieces of this that are coherent, but don't take on the rant. And then I BCC'd it to a guy that works with this other guy and I said, tell me if I'm fucked up because
Yep,
I'm too close to it to trust my own judgment on this.
yep,
And I trust his judgment completely. So I've learned to do that as sort of a radiator of heat to keep it from overheating. I gotta
yes,
share with trusted others and defer to their judgment because I'm too close to the fire.
yep. And the other thing
So
I've found,
anyway, my intention would be to just hang this in a private space in the base camp uh, for other members of the OWL group to meet you and understand, and anybody else in the HCU alumni. Now, if that's not upon reflection, if you'd rather not do that, I don't have to do that, and I'll just send you the link for the video, or we can edit or whatever. But my personal opinion is that you didn't say anything that would. If I was your best friend, there's nothing you said tonight that I would say you
uh,
might not want to let that out in public, buddy.
Yeah, it reflects on me, but not particularly bad.
Yeah, I think we're all just, I mean, because there was nothing in there to, I mean, you were on the receiving end of some shitty behavior.
Yeah.
And let he who has never been shat upon,
Exactly.
not cast the first stone, but just, yeah, everybody's kind of been on the receiving end of something, hopefully not that bad, but you've come through it okay. So, all right, we'll see you Thursday.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, take good care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.